today I'm going to do something a little bit different with my videos, and I'm going to play one of the most iconic games in video game history. It's a game that needs absolutely no introductions, and it is Space Invaders. Came out in 1978 and had two cabinets, a Taito and a Midway. Now I think that came out in Japan in the late 70s, but didn't come to Europe until I think around about 1980, 1981. So we in the UK didn't get to see this until the 80s, and I know it was the very first video game experience I had. But of course, it wasn't actually the first video game. It's the one that really kicked off the video game industry, but it wasn't the first video game. That goes back to a game called Computer Space. It's a very strange looking cabinet, something that I've never seen at all. But then we also go to 1972 and we had Atari's Pong. Now this is a cabinet you may well have never seen because it is so old. It is very rare. However, this image that I'm showing you is of a Pong cabinet at Arcade Archive, which is in Gloucestershire. Now I'm going to be talking about Arcade Archive on a future video coming up pretty soon. But for now, we're talking Space Invaders. So first of all, let me load up the game. I will be playing a game. So there is the Taito cabinet, and on the fly you're seeing the Midway cabinet. So if you want to just see the gameplay, go to the end of the video. I'll put the time in the description. But this video is more about those that are either new to MAME, or if whenever you've played Space Invaders in MAME, all you see is this, a black and white screen. Now obviously those that are familiar with the arcade version of Space Invaders, it's a very colourful looking cabinet, very alien-like, and it certainly looks more interesting than what you're seeing on the screen at the moment. So, if you want to actually make your Space Invaders game in MAME look very much like the arcade game itself, then this could well be the video for you. So, Space Invaders itself is, in fact, just a black and white game. That is all it is. The actual video purpose itself is just black and white. All the colour in that is added by other outside factors and basically artwork. Now, MAME does allow for artwork. It's very, very clever and does lots of different things. Now the first thing you want to do to see if you've actually got the relevant files is to go into the MAME settings itself. It should look something like this. Now I am actually using an older version of MAME. If you've got a newer one, it won't look quite like this when you go into video options. That's the option what you want to select. What you might see now is another screen before you see this. It may say screen 0. Select that and you should see this screen. Now if this menu looks something like this, where you see Midway, Taito, artwork, etc., then you've already got the necessary file that you need. Don't worry if your options just look literally like this, so you just see standard pixel aspect and nothing else, then you're actually missing the artwork file and you won't be able to do this until you get the file. It's really easy to get. It will take you literally no more than 2 minutes. Okay, so what you're going to need to do is head over to Mr. Do's Arcade. I'll put the website link in the description of this video. If you're familiar with MAME World, the website as well, there's a link to Mr. Do's Arcade on there. So once you're on the Mr. Do's Arcade website, if you go to the download section, what you want to do is download a file called invaders.lay. So that is basically a layout file. It's an artwork file that contains all of the artwork. Mr. Do's Arcade is an incredible site. It's dedicated to actually bringing back all the artwork from all the old arcade games. Now, once you've got the invaders.lay file, what you want to do is actually put that file into your artwork folder, which is MAME's dedicated artwork folder. Okay, once it's in there, first thing you need to do is check that your ROM is actually called Invaders. If your Space Invaders is called Space Invaders ROM is called Invaders, you'll be fine. If you've got a slightly different version, all you need to do is rename your invaders.lay file to the same name as your Space Invaders ROM itself, but generally it will be Invaders. Okay, now once you've got that file, come back to this menu and it should now look something like this. I've got the old artwork. They may well have updated this since, but it will pretty much be the same. Now the first thing I'm going to do, you've got the Midway and your Taito. I'm going to select the Taito upright artwork for now. They're the only two you really want. Cabaret artwork, cocktail, that's for the cocktail tables. They wouldn't have had this artwork that you're about to see, so you just see a little bit of colour, nothing more than that. Okay, again, if you still see a black and white screen like this, don't worry. It may just mean everything else is disabled, but I just want to explain how the artwork is made up on a Space Invaders machine in case you don't already know. Now, the first thing is to see there is no colour in Space Invaders at all. To create the colour that you see on the screen, all they did in the arcade was they put a transparent overlay over the top of the screen, and it was green for the shield area. So if I turn that off again for a minute, I'm actually going to pause the game whilst we're on the Space Invaders view. So where the shields are, there was a green transparent strip over that then just created the green. So the graphics are black and white, green transparent sheet over there, and then obviously a little bit of green over your actual battleships as well. Then at the top of the screen, although there's no spaceship there, that strip would be red. Okay, so then what would happen is every time you fire a bullet, as your bullet passed through the green section, your bullet would turn green because obviously it can't do anything else. It's got a layer over the top of it. It would turn white when it hit the main playing field, and then it would turn red as it hit the top of the screen on the red spaceship strip. Okay, so if we go back into the menu, all we need to do is where it says overlays down at the bottom, is just enable that, and the artwork file, there it is, we'll add in our overlay. So the graphics haven't just turned green, there's just an overlay on the top of that now makes it look green. So the ship is green, your spare ships are in green as well, and as you can see the bullet itself is now green as well, and when it travels to this section it will turn white. Okay, now also you'll recall that it had a really beautiful artwork in the background of the planet drop down, and the actual aliens would actually sit, they looked like they were actually floating on top of that artwork. Now, the way that which was done in the arcade was the screen was actually a mirror image of this. It was in complete reverse, and the screen, you didn't look at it. The screen was face upwards in the cabinet, so the only way you could actually physically see the monitor would be to look over into the monitor, into the screen, and you'd see the screen down below. What you were actually looking at was a reflection of the screen. So there was a semi-transparent mirror at a 45-degree angle in the machine that reflected the screen. So you didn't see the black area, all you saw were the white and coloured graphics, well not coloured graphics, but the overlay onto the backdrop, and it would look like they were floating on the screen. So it would look really cool. And something for the 70s and early 80s, that was pretty incredible. So the backdrop itself, the planet, was simply just a piece of card or something like that was in the back of the machine to create it looking like the aliens were now hovering over a planet. So again, with that artwork itself, we can turn that on by simply going to the backdrops and enable that, and lo and behold, there we've got it. We've now got our beautiful backdrop with our planets there. So I say this is now the Tato version. Now what you'll notice is that the screen has now got a little bit smaller. There's a good reason for that, and we can fix that as well. Obviously what you also had around the machine was the bezel that we're also used to now. But with Space Invaders, the actual bezel was also the marquee. It was quite large. Now we can turn that on as well. If I turn that on, what you'll now see is the actual Tato bezel and marquee and the screen as you would have seen it in the arcade. But of course that's actually quite small. It's not really, you don't really want to play your Space Invaders on your machine like this because it makes the screen quite small, unless you've got a really massive screen. So what we can do is we can actually crop that by going to the bottom, looking at the view and changing it to cropped. And what that will do, it will then zoom in on the actual game screen and just crop the artwork. So really all you can see now is just a little bit of the bezel. Now if you actually wanted to see the bezel around here, all you could do is make your own bezel. If I change it back to the full view, you can actually make your own bezel and just literally cut this section here and this section here and make the bezel that you would see on many of my videos that you've seen before, and then add that on, and then you'd actually have that around the outside. However, I just think it looks so much better without the bezel. So if I just turn the bezel off, again, we can't create that depth that we had with the floating aliens because we don't have a reflective screen. But I think with the wide screen itself, it just looks so much better. It gives you the width and does pretty much replicate how Space Invaders looked in the arcade. Now, as I say, that's the Tato cabinet, but what you can also do is switch to the Midway artwork. Just slightly different, very slightly different backdrop. And again, if we look at the bezel, turn the bezel on and look at the full view, again, you've now got a slightly different bezel. That's the Midway version of it. But of course, the game itself is still exactly the same. So again, I'm going to turn that off. So in order to turn it off, you just need to put it into cropped view. So it just crops the artwork, not the game. The game goes full screen, and I'm going to turn off the bezel. So from there, if I get the game running again, once again, you'll see it running. You'll see the bullets also go through the transparent layer. So that's how you make your Space Invaders now look pretty much as it did in the arcade. And I think it's pretty cool the way that actually looks. So now let's play a game. I'm not particularly good at this game, so it's not going to last that long. Well, of course, there are only one set of aliens that just get harder as you clear the screen. I don't particularly have, well, actually I suppose I do have a bit of a strategy behind this. It's not a particularly good strategy because I'm not good at it. But I tend to take out a few aliens and then take them from the side. Now, one thing I will say, if you are in widescreen mode, your ship cannot move beyond here. That is the edge of the screen, as it would have been in the arcade. So that is as far as you can move. Now, as I say, this was the very first game that I played in the arcades. I actually went to visit my stepdad's place of work with my mum and my stepdad, of course. And lo and behold, when we were in the canteen, there was this Space Invaders machine. Well, I looked at it and I thought, what on earth is that? And I was kind of like intrigued by it and amazed at the same time. Got my mum to give me a few 10p's, started playing the game, and I was completely hooked. That was the start of my video game craze. Just seeing this Space Invaders machine back in the really early 80s was just incredible. Okay, upon today's standards, it may seem like nothing, but this is the game that started it all. Is there anyone in the world that has never heard of Space Invaders? Surely not. You know, the symbol for arcades itself is usually a Space Invader. And there is a common myth as well, that in Japan, this game was so popular in Japan when it came out, that they actually had a shortage of 100 yen coins. Now, as far as I'm aware, that is a myth. That's not really the case, because obviously every single day, the game companies emptied their machines, and obviously then the coins were reused. But yeah, it's a common myth that it was just so popular that they had a coin shortage in Japan. Again, simple game, but hard to master. How long can you last on this game? Obviously there's no continue, so you can only play one game. Again, here comes my strategy. Sometimes I get caught out, I stay too long. Of course, their bullets fire down, get me because I can't move any further to the left. Can I get that spaceship? No, I can't. Too busy getting the spaceship that I actually got myself shot down. Yeah, I should just not bother going for the spaceship. Not a good strategy. Again, for 1978 when it came out, and the early 80s here in Europe and the UK, what a game this was. So addictive back in the day, and still a great game to play now. Real good nostalgia feeling. But as I say, if you've been playing this in black and white on MAME and just thinking, wow, God, this just looks dull and boring, just see how easy it is to make it look this way. Just relive the good old days of arcade gaming with Space Invaders. And again, another thing which many people may know or not know, of course, is that obviously when you start to clear the screen of invaders, you instantly notice that they get quicker. Now, this was never actually intended when the game was actually created. So the guy that actually programmed the game, I don't remember his name, it is Japanese, not something that rolls off the tongue. Oh, what a stupid idiot. Not the guy, obviously me, for getting shot down and nearly getting shot down again. Was that they're always meant to be the same speed the whole way through. But of course, those that know games like Double Dragon, and obviously lots of sprites back in the day being drawn and moved on the screen at the same time, the computers couldn't handle it. So also with lots of sprites, you'd get slowdown. Now obviously when you start to destroy the aliens, or the invaders should I say, obviously that's less sprites to be drawn on the screen, the computer gets faster. So that's exactly what happened. As you start clearing the screen of the invaders, the computer can generate them quicker, move them quicker, so you've now got the moving image. So there we go, that's the end of my game. That was a pretty poor game, I must admit. So yeah, so it wasn't intentional, but when this started to happen, the actual programmer actually thought, I quite like this is really good, and just left it in rather than programming it so that it stayed the same speed. I think this game would be really dull if they stayed at the same speed the whole way through, and it's great that they actually do speed up. So anyway, that is Space Invaders. That's how to play it as it would have been in the arcade. Create your artwork. It's all there, it's freely available and really easy to download and add to your MAME and make it look that way. Anyway, thanks for watching. See you all again soon.